This is working. This is Nathan Raaths, and as you guys know, this is the first time we've ever tried to live stream. I'm actually quite excited, and as you guys know, I've picked Heinrich Reisenhofer to join me. There were many reasons why I picked him, but besides the fact that I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation, I also am quite familiar with him. So if we bugger this up, we can just have a good laugh about it and try and fix it in the middle of the interview. So yeah, those guys who are watching it live, I will try and have a look every now and again when Heinrich is sharing with us at the comment section. But I think for mostly, we're just going to free flow. Heinrich, before I bring you in, I know a lot of people perhaps in this group will not know you. You've been a theatre director. I know you've been involved in many different transformational organizations, either as a supporter or as a coach, activism. I mentioned a theatre director, which also went into Just Men, which I'd like to touch on tonight. I know that that's something that you developed, that you were actually, if I'm not mistaken, given an award for possibly winning South African of the Year or something for that. So we'll dive into that. I remember that you had to at one stage do a speech in Johannesburg about what you had created. Anyways, I bring you into that space. I know you more as the shamanic facilitator, prolific space holder, and a coach, a healer, and a friend. So welcome to the space.
Thank you, my brother. It's good to be here.
I thought if I gave you a chance to say kind of, what it is that, why I thought this conversation would be interesting, that you would just leave all those parts out. So Heinrich, I thought a really good start for us is let's just have a conversation a little bit about, I have mentioned that you're very much involved in the shamanic work and all sorts of things nowadays, but do you want to tell us a little bit about what has developed your perceptions as a man? And you can answer that any way you want.
Sure, specifically as a man.
Well, you're a man.
Well, I mean, as a man or as a human being, I think because it's been that my journey in terms of being a man has been a very specific one, just in terms of a journey of healing, the journey of really reconciling with my relationship with men. A lot of the reasons why I went on, been on this path, on this journey of healing, this path of transformation, has been to transform my relationship and myself as a man, which is why, my partnership with you and just that encountering has been such a transformative thing. I didn't have very powerful relationships with men because I didn't have a powerful relationship with myself as a man, and that's something that's really been like a very significant part of my medicine work, the space that we hold as men, the space that we need to transform as men. And that's also really been why I gravitated towards the subject of gender-based violence, because it was a subject that showed up as a huge area that needed to be taken on in this country. Obviously, with how things have transpired, it was important to start getting the stories out and to have men step up and tell their stories. So yeah,
okay, before we get there though, if you don't mind, what I'd love you to do is give us just a little bit of a down run of what Heinrich has been doing for the last 10 years. And then we'll start getting towards these more pertinent things. So give us a little bit of a background, just of, it's a difficult thing to speak about yourself, but just a bit of what has helped develop and shaped your perceptions.
So, I mean, if I'm going to talk about perceptions, I'd have to go back a little bit further, because the last 10 years or the last 12 years of my life has really been in the space of transformational work. I came into an organization called Landmark, and they're very much about an organization that is about transformation. And I've been in different organizations and spaces, but it has been about personal and interpersonal transformation. But my journey with transformation started longer before. It started right when I was still in high school, when I was very much politically involved and wanting to see the country transform and wanting to get into theater, because theater at that time was a very politicized medium. It was a medium that that was about transforming things on stage, because it was the one place that wasn't banned. You know, content would be banned on television and in the media, but the stage was the one place where people could still stand strong and really voice what they needed, what they saw needed to be changed. And so that's initially why I went into theater, was to be involved in that level of transformation work. And it's important for me because even though I've been I've been a producer and I've been a director and very successful, won a lot of awards, that impetus for wanting to create transformation. I did a production in 1999 called SAPE, which is all about alcoholism, the history of alcohol use and abuse in South Africa. And those kind of subjects that really inspired me, because those things sit at the core of where things kind of break down in the social fabric and so on. But that journey of dealing with the external stuff, like our social systems and those kind of things, started coming more and more towards that personal journey, towards realizing that we're not going to change anything in our environment unless we start learning how to change ourselves. And so personal transformation became very important to me, and I became interested in people's actual stories as opposed to fictional stories about situations and so on. What interested me and where I felt the true alchemy of transformation was in people's actual personal experiences, and that's why I've been drawn closer and closer to coaching, facilitation, group facilitation, and that kind of moved me closer to the shamanic space. And when I experienced a plant medicine journey with you 5-6 years ago, it transformed my entire inner space in a way that I'd never imagined possible. And it opened up so much for me. It kind of brought so much together for me. So now we're in the last 10 years, and the last 10 years has been literally about letting go of my role and persona as the successful director who was making a lot of money and who was winning awards and who had the fame and was very much in the material world and the egocentric world, and it's been a process of breaking that down and losing that, almost kind of losing everyone in my life to just embark on a completely different path, which is kind of then brought me into this particular space and finding out really what my passion is, what my purpose, my calling is. And it's been a lot of letting go and shedding and losing, and getting to the core of what really is important for me and what I want my life to be about, or what I want the rest of my life to be about.
Yeah, that's quite powerful. I mean, also something I think just for people maybe listening that came up for me with what you were sharing before we get present to where that brings you to now.
Yeah.
Is quite a lot of people have been speaking about the fact that they have lost a lot of people in their lives when they try and go on a path of authenticity, or that in some ways, as one of your songs say, all the castles come crumbling down. What thoughts do you have on that? Do you think that your experience of pretty much having a large portion of your life disappear and transform, where you changed what was important to you, do you think that that's a regular thing with people, or do you think that any thoughts on it?
I would say that when we talk about transformation, which is like really transforming from one thing into another, I think that would be pretty much a consistent thing. If you are really experiencing that, like you're a completely different person with shifted values. I mean, there's core values that are still very much what I'm about. But I've literally, I had a whole circle and a whole environment of people. But then in that, I was also pretending to be something. I was showing up as something. And the minute I let go of it, it was as if people just literally let go. It was like I was lost for a while. And because the expectation of where I was in terms of being successful, I was now not successful anymore. I was essentially a fallen kind of person compared to where where I was. And I think it's taken a while for people to then adjust and go, actually, he's on a different track, but a different version of what accomplishment is or what success is. It just doesn't happen to be in the paradigm of what it is that I lived in before. And I think it confused a lot of people who understood me in a certain way. And so there was just a kind of a very gradual moving away. And I think for me, it was also just being willing to step into a new space and to find new people.
It's very powerful. Thank you. And the way you shared is perfect, because I also want people that are going through trying to find the courage to leave. As you said perfectly, it's almost like I experienced it in the martial arts world, where I had such a persona built around a certain thing that to leave that and to almost leave all your supposed, now I just see it as a shell. So I think it's quite empowering for people. And then what I wanted to ask you before we move more to what you're presently involved in is just a little bit to tell us about Just Men and how you got involved in what it is you actually did.
So, I mean, it started, I developed a forgiveness program, a 21-day forgiveness program. And part of that program, when people came into a space and I shared with them about the process and so on, and part of that process was sharing my journey as a man. And a lot of it was about forgiving men in my life who had caused a lot of pain to women in that space. And so there's a lot of shame that I carried about being a man because of those men, and so I spoke about my journey of forgiveness in a man and my process of embracing all the shadow aspects of myself, like not denying that I have the capability of being quite all the terrible things that men can be, and embracing that and owning it, rather going, that's not me. The producer, the CEO of the Baxter was in one of those sessions, and then we went into a conversation because at that time there was a big story happening. It was a few actually. The big one was what was the hashtag?
The Me Too.
Yeah, so it was at that point where the hashtag Me Too movement was very, very loud and very strong, and there was very big conversation about, well, where are the men's voices? Who's willing to stand up and facilitate the men's voices of showing up and owning up for this culture? And it was a very, very scary project taking it on, because we knew that we would firing line of a lot of anger and a lot of collective anger, but it was to be willing to stand and go, okay, I'm going to stand up with a group of men, and we're going to tell stories about how we are part of this culture, this toxic culture, and how we've contributed to it, and how, just really owning up and speaking about it. And out of that was a production that was born, where I took a group of men through a very deep transformative process to start speaking about their shame and really stand on stage and share their stories. And it was an incredibly powerful event, having men stand and be so vulnerable and naked and not hide behind a script, but actually just stand on stage and tell like raw, really gutsy, raw stories.
Yeah, because I mean, I remember actually coming onto some of the sessions while you were preparing these guys to deliver. And these guys were going through a life-changing ceremonial experience, because they were essentially going to share something about how they participated in their culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, will you speak a little bit more of that? It was so inspiring to see.
I think we were all absolutely terrified, because we didn't know how it would show up on stage, because in the container that we created in the rehearsal space, we created an incredible amount of safety so that men could come and tell their stories, but to do it on stage, there was a lot of preparation, and there was huge amounts of terror. Some of them shared stories that they hadn't even shared to their families or important people to them, and realizations. I mean, one of them realized that he had been raped as a young boy, and just because of the culture, he didn't even understand that actually was rape, that he was not of a consensual age. So it was a lot of shame-based stuff that they had to really prepare themselves to stand on stage, and so there was a lot of preparation work, a lot of ritual work, a lot of um, uh, um, yeah, just a lot of very deep preparation and safety work, and it turned out to be incredibly powerful. But it was also quite taxing for them to do that every night on stage. I mean, they were literally in tears every single night, and the audience was shocked. I mean, there was often dead silence and gasps in the audience, just because the stories were so profoundly real, and they were doing it in a public space. So it was an incredible movement and an incredible production. I mean, we had tons and tons of men coming, having kids see it as well. There were schools that did marches coming to the production, taking a stand about gender-based violence. So it was an incredibly empowering process. And it was actually something that was supposed to continue last year as well. And then, of course, COVID happened, and then all funding kind of just disappeared, and we obviously couldn't do that work anymore.
It was so inspiring. I mean, you and I've had this discussion before, but even watching what you were doing, trying to prepare these guys, and then, of course, observing how your role as a shamanic facilitator, because I'm sure these actors, I remember when they arrived in the morning, used to smudge them in and used to teach them how to hold space for each other. And when I heard the stories that were coming out of these men, it was incredible. I think it was my first time where I got to glimpse the other side of you and how all of your, let's say, skills were coming together at that point. It was really powerful. And I know you mentioned this, but man, schools came out, people came out in droves for it. It was very inspiring. So I just really wanted to bring it up. And yeah, as you said, it's very taxing work, but it's going to be interesting. Closing thoughts on that. I'm sure a few people are going to want to know, do you think that it will continue in the future?
I mean, I actually don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I would definitely want to continue some aspect of the movement. However, personally, I do not want to stay focused on the problem, and gender-based violence is the framing of the problem. For me, what I'm really interested in is transforming and empowering that sacred masculine, that very different kind of masculine, that shows up. And so, I mean, we've been speaking about doing work where we create a lot more masculine context, doing men's work, where we start really fostering a very powerful shamanic, sacred masculine presence, and groups and men coming together. I mean, we're already experiencing it in our work, where we're seeing such powerful men, big men, like typically big, strong men who are able to stand and cry and just talk about real stuff and not shy away from their feelings or their shame. So, I mean, I feel the work is happening. I think it was important to focus on the problem at a certain point and tackle it, but I wouldn't want to stay in the problem, because it kind of would go in circles. I'm dealing with gender-based violence, rather going, we want to bring forth this new kind of man into the space and really foster these powerful men.
I love that. I mean, there was in all these conversations and all the people that I've met that are involved at some level, as you said, most of it is almost like once the wound has been made, it's like that last line of defense. And I just love the idea of going to the source. And I mean, I think this would be a really good conversation for us to have for a moment, because essentially we're talking about shame.
Yeah.
And I myself, I think it's something that is popping up so much in our work and in your own work. And I don't know what your perspective of it is, but I have found myself highly insecure until probably 2-3 years ago about what it was to even be a man. Any thoughts on that for you? I mean, your own path in, because, essentially what I'm suggesting is many of us have not had a positive masculine role model in any way. And it's left me in a very interesting situation with what things I wanted to value.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the big thing is just the lack of that very strong mentoring, or that sense of like, this is how you do it. And I think about when I'm dealing with relationship challenges, or when I was dealing with challenges in my marriage, there wasn't that man who I could go, and let me go and speak to that older guy, and had to find these people. And in many respects, it feels like we've also we've literally to recreate this culture of what this kind of man that we want to see and be. This man that has the combination of being able to be very vulnerable and really open with their feelings, but at the same time, and this has been my challenge, to be like a strong container with strong boundaries and firm, and to stand my ground, which is not something that I've really been taught how to do or grown up. I literally had to like learn it the hard way by bumping my head and just realizing, you are where you are just because you're not creating clear boundaries and holding them firmly. And, so it's this balance in terms of showing up as the masculine. And I think that's been a big conversation of learning and almost creating it entirely anew. And that's interestingly where my path with San Pedro has been such a powerful, San Pedro is a plant medicine, and it's a masculine plant medicine, but it's almost in that working with a medicine, and it showed me a lineage that had been missing in terms of that I needed to reclaim and then recreate my sense of what I would want to pass on to other men, and how I'd want to show up because essentially we are becoming the mentors of the men of tomorrow. And the question is like, what do we want to impart? What do I want to share? How do I want men to see me in a way, but to like, what are they going to want to take from me? What are they going to want to learn from me? And so I feel it's almost like we're creating that all like completely from scratch.
Yeah, I remember a very powerful conversation you and I had, but just the way we frameworked it was that we forget that all lineages begin somewhere.
Yeah.
And just thinking of it on that level of responsibility when you think about creating community is what kind of lineage you'd actually build, which I think brings us to the perfect place now, because, roughly in my head and playfully, I want to spend time with you, spend the first little while diving into a bit of where you came from. And now we're on perfect time, starting to pull into where you found yourself nowadays, what you're most passionate about. Just what do you want to share with us about what you're up to these days?
So I think there was a big transformation that happened for me. I was in an organization called Landmark, and I was a program leader, and working there, learning, coaching, and there was a few people who were talking about, oh, you got to try this ayahuasca. We've this incredible experience. You've got to do that. And the whole thing about Landmark is they're very much into enrolling you. Like they enroll you so that you're so like inspired, touched, and moved by what it is that the experience that you decide to do themselves. And so eventually it was after a lot of like convincing, because I didn't want to, because I had a lot of resistance in terms of doing, putting substance into me, or taking something that wasn't my natural state, because I was into meditation and I was in a very kind of practical, methodical kind of person. I went on my first journey, and I did a few journeys, and it was about the second or third journey that I really had an incredibly profound experience in terms of my voice and what was coming out. And I remember you would hold the space, and then at the end of the ceremony, you invited people to bring their voice into the space. And I experienced my voice in the space and in the medicine, and there was some kind of alchemy between my voice and the medicine that opened up a passage for me that I had closed down my relationship to my voice because I didn't like the sound, or I hadn't experienced myself. I had sung before, and I'd sung on stage, but I was always singing to please, or I was singing to be heard, but there was something else that came through. And I remember in a particular ceremony, there was a voice, an incredibly beautiful, angelic voice, singing a mantra. And this mantra literally pierced right into the depths of who I am, that it was like, I've heard this before. And immediately afterwards, after that ceremony, I went to try and find that mantra, and I learned that mantra. I literally had that mantra, like I had that connection to the divine in that mantra. And I just sang that again and again and again. And then at some point, I came to a ceremony, with you we were going to just assist you to hold space, and you asked me to sing. And I was just singing. That was the only thing I was singing. And and I had a singing bowl, and it was just the singing bowl and that sound and that mantra that was just penetrating every cell of my body. And it was just from there that it just became so clear that my path was about bringing forth that sound and it was hard to describe, but it's just something that I followed as a feeling ever since. And so the journey into plant medicine has been through sound, through that channel of sound, through the channel to the channel of the voice and the body. And then everything has just unfolded from there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been quite something to experience from the outside, because I mean, we're telling the story rather quickly, but you're certainly not talking about doing a ceremony and then singing and suddenly you were singing. I mean, we're talking about you doing many quests and many ceremonies and a lot of work through the months and the years, and slowly, gradually, almost as though you were learning to, because it's almost like you had let music go completely out of your life.
Yeah.
And you rediscovered it, almost as though the plants have retaught you. And now that people know or have experienced the kind of music that you're producing, which is a terrible word, producing, because as you and I have joked, every time you sing a song, I like to think that you sing it completely differently. But I must say that from the outside, the one thing I have to say, and I think there's a lot of people who are listening who have experienced it, your music completely rocks the foundations of people's vibrational essence. It makes them really question things. And I know that you've come, where would you say, speak a little bit, I think, about your music, where it is today and where you hope it to go.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, from that point, I mean, when I did that journey, I just did every single journey afterwards. Every single vision quest, we were there, and it has been a very just gradual unfolding. The big thing, I think, of the medicine work is just working with different medicine singers, experiencing all the different people. And the journey has been a profound one of meeting people and just realizing the extent to which you can do healing work with a voice, and how deep and how far you can go. And it has been about learning different songs from different traditions, different cultures, different medicine traditions, hearing how that sounds and how it moves and how it shifts vibrations. And it's been many years of just learning songs and working with different instruments. I got a harmonium, and then I started playing harmonium, and I had singing bowls, and then I had a drum, and working with all these different things has just been like one stage of growth after another. And then at the end of the year before last, 2019, I was at Learning Clan, and I was listening to a lot of people and their songs, and people were saying, and when I sang, people would say to me, "That's incredible. Did you write that?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "Did you write that song?" I was like, "No." It's like, oh, they were disappointed because they said it sounds like you wrote them. They're coming from you. I said, "Yeah, they do come from me, but I didn't write them." And then I was just like, "Okay, you need to write your own songs." And so I decided. I committed last year that I was going to learn to start writing songs. And even if it sounded terrible, and even if it, even if it just was pathetic and it fell, I would just actually learn to do it, because you just do it by trial and error. And COVID then happened, and then it really was like there was just me and a guitar. So I bought the guitar. I got the guitar at the beginning of last year. So I had this guitar. I was learning to play the guitar, and I just had a few chords. And then I was like, okay, you're just gonna have to to learn to write songs. And then the first song came out of I did a private journey, like a ayahuasca journey, and the first song just came out, and it just came out, and it was just there. And I woke up every morning and I'd write and write and write until like 3 weeks later there was a song. And now it's a year later and I've got 9 songs that I've written, that I'm now looking to just record and put down so that I can share them in other ways than just in ceremony.
I mean, I can't even, it's almost like it feels like it's been years. I can't even believe that you just started writing songs, because it feels like whenever you walk into my house, you've got a new song, and it's usually just like a week or two apart. And the best part is, the best part is that they have, these songs are basically becoming anthems in our community. I mean, I couldn't believe at the last gathering when you started to play your own songs that nearly the entire room knew the words. I was a little bit blown away. And you know, when people are going through quite a difficult phase in their journey, they're feeling a little bit vulnerable, and the whole room just lifted. It was quite incredible. I was thinking, I know it's like putting you on quite the spot because of tuning things, but if you could maybe play a song for us. I don't know how good the sound would be on this kind of what's it called, delivery system, but then it would give me a chance as well, if you're up for that, to then have a look in the Facebook group. And what I'll do is just read all the comments to see if there's anything in specific people want us to cover in the second half of the chat. But so far, I'm loving where it is and where it's going. I think, How do you feel about that?
Cool. Yeah. I'm going to just do a recent song that's just been like something that I've been, I don't know what it's going to sound like, but anyway, we're going to go anyway.
It's all good. I'm putting you on the spot, and then maybe we'll do one at the end if it goes well. I'm going to go have a look, and I'll see you in a minute.
Okay. Won't you come sit with me, and I will pour you some tea and share the medicine of song so you can pray along. Won't you come sit with me, and I will pour you some tea and share the medicine of song so you can pray along. Come pray along. Come pray along. Come pray along with me. Come pray, come pray, come pray along. Come pray along. Come pray along with me. Come pray. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bonatu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishabhai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishabhai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Won't you come sit with me, and I will pour you some tea and share the medicine of song so you can pray along. Won't you come sit with me, and I will pour you some tea and share the medicine of song so you can pray along. Pray along. Come pray along. Come pray along with me. Come pray, come pray, come pray along. Come pray along. Come pray along with me. Come pray, come pray along.
Thank you, my brother. I only think I've heard that once or twice. So that, as you said, is probably one of your newer things that you are playing with. I think I needed that. We'll call that a mid-interview anchor. And then I went to see in the group, and there's nothing anybody particularly needs. They're just all involved and engaged. So it's fantastic. So I think where that brings us to a point now is this conversation is been actually so interesting. You and I now obviously running congruently for a few years together, we started to have some pretty freaking profound conversations. And I think from my side, because this is really not so much about me, but from my side, I think for the first time in my life, I was having really, really complex, difficult conversations about what I was seeing in my work and in work. And by work, I just means the spiritual path. And you and I seem to be agreeing on some absolutely pivotal things, which I was battling even in coffee conversation with anybody to kind of perceive the way I was at that moment. And I think that the most important thing for me is that I think I just knew that you and I were going to crash and coincide. So that brings us very much to what it is you're up to today. And the one thing I've promised everybody, especially because of the fact that we get asked the same questions over and over, and this group that we're in right now, I think is very largely a holding group for a lot of people that either work with plant medicine or are going to work with plant medicine. So I think maybe a very good way to utilize this time, because we did say that we would, is whether we can have a conversation about someone who is considering doing a vision quest. And let's start with that. Like, what kind of considerations would a person want to do one? Let's begin with that. Let's open the conversation there, or wherever you wish to take it.
I mean, I would like to keep it personal because I have been talking about my own journey, and it's such a mercurial thing in terms of being able to say what the journey is about. But the possibility of being in an experience that is so life-changing that it almost feels, not almost, it actually changed the actual direction of your life. And that's something that people speak about when, they speak about having a profound ayahuasca ceremony or journey. That something so fundamental shifts that literally the direction of where they've been pointing to in their life changes, that there's such fundamental changes that happens in their path. And it's such an incredible gift to have that opportunity to see your life in such a context and way that you could actually realize, wow, okay, this is actually what I'm about. And this is really what life is about. And this is where I want to go. And for people who are considering doing this journey, it's quite a scary concept, because it will, part of it is that you could like really rethink your entire existence of why you are the way that you are, and do you want to be that way? But what a profound gift to actually, when in your lifetime, be able to choose from a very broad way of seeing life, a very huge perspective of being able to see your life, and to really have a profound context. I mean, I have a conversation with people in coaching. Like, if you were sitting on your deathbed looking back at your life, what would be a life well lived? What would be a life that you would go, that was worth going through everything for? And to be able to actually have that perspective of life, to see life in the broader context, and then to come back to where you are now and then say, okay, well, how do I want to do that? That's what this offers. It offers you that opportunity to really, really see things in a way that you've never, ever seen, to connect to a guidance and an energy. And it obviously is different for every single person that does it. So there's no saying how it will go. But that's what it is. We create that opportunity for people to have a profound reckoning with themselves.
I like that you make that as one of the most important things from your personal, as you said, you really just speaking from where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And I think that an incredible thing is like to hold that multidimensional state, or let's keep it in a way that perhaps someone who hasn't been into that state could go be, but to just have such profound realizations is such a special thing. But I love the idea that I think it was John Goodfeather or whatever, which was his English name in the early 1900s, where he spoke about the fact that it's an opportunity to go and sit on top of the mountain just for a short while. It's going to be temporary, and you're going to have that peak human experience where you can look down at the jungles where you've always been lost and wondered how random it is, and to just have that opportunity to go, oh my goodness, this is not random. I got myself into this whole thing. And I think one thing that ayahuasca, if I've ever heard criticism of it, it has been that you don't necessarily keep that clarity. And I would agree with that. You don't necessarily remember exactly how every cog of the universe works, but just having glimpsed without the interference of another person, without doctrine, to me, as we say, is it's just an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with yourself without any external interference. And yeah, so I like the way you perceive that. That is the opportunity that it's at hand. And then how do you feel about this whole perception? There's a lot of mixed opinions about then what was your own journey with preparing for a vision quest, and like in different approaches, what kind of different results did you get? Because as you said, let's keep it quite personal. But the thing we get asked, as you know, probably 20 times a week is, does it really matter the way I eat? And does it really matter what kind of head frame I'm in? Let's talk from your perspective first, in your journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's always interesting if you've never done it before to go, well, why should I do it? And I mean, obviously, when I first heard about it and I read the brief, and it was like, okay, these foods you've got to cut out. And I was like, okay, yeah, because you don't, you obviously don't want to get ill from, but then there was like, no sex or masturbating before. And I was like, okay, so obviously some sacred thing, it was some you so coming into it, there's all these things of like, why, and I don't understand why. But then when in the ceremony itself and you're in the experience, then suddenly you have that profound realization of like, oh, that all makes sense. Everything that didn't make sense, like just the notion of purging didn't make sense. It occurred like a horrible thing to do. Why would you want to go and do a ceremony where you do something like purge? It's just, that sounds awful. Why would you want to do it? And then when you're in it, it all makes sense. And you go, of course you want to purge because you want to let go of the stuff. It just suddenly just all makes sense in a way that it's never before. And it's about trusting that once you've had that experience, then you get very interested and curious about, wow, if I lighten myself of what it is that I'm constantly sticking inside in terms of thoughts and in food, and I lighten the foods that I eat, that I can feel that I become when I'm fasting, or I'm just having a fruit fast or a water fast, I can feel my body become lighter, my thoughts become clearer, my insights and my inner voice starts getting more and more pronounced. And so it starts becoming an experimentation. You go, oh, actually, if I just go deeper, and then if I meditate at the same time, I can really start entering these very subtle states, which were incoherent to me before, because I was so in the noise of eating and thinking and doing. And then suddenly this ability to start touching these subtle sensibilities and sensitivities. And with that is messages and clarities and creativity and a whole lot of things that becomes available. And that's why, when we're experiencing like experienced journeyers who come to a journey, they really do take their fasting and their diets quite seriously, because it's their process. And then they're with their journals and they're writing stuff down and they're processing and they're sitting. And especially if they're grappling with something that's difficult and they're like wanting to get to like where that feeling is and where that hook is and where those stories are in their minds that they're not able to see, that's in their blind spot. And it becomes an incredibly beautiful dance with your inner space to try and understand your inner geography and to work with your inner compass and how you feel and how you move. It becomes a beautiful dance. And I think for each person it's different, but when you just look at how it's done and you learn from from those things and pick up on it, it becomes incredibly powerful. It's like the one thing about not having sex before a ceremony really does, you do have an incredible power in your kundalini, and that energy center of yours that becomes incredibly powerful, and it feeds a very powerful combination of chakra energies. And I think just working with it is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I think that's, I actually got completely lost in your answer there. That was really powerful. And you sent me off on all these thoughts about myself. And because I must say that what you were connecting me to is the fact that if I had to be dead honest with myself, it was people that had actually come to ayahuasca many times that take the preparation far more seriously than the guys who are doing it for the first time. And then I was listening to your story and I was thinking about my own. I mean, I think I was working with ayahuasca for many years before I even tried to fast for a few days. I know you and I, for instance, we fasted for 5 days, no food, just water, before we went into hold this space for a vision quest. But that's a fascinating thing, because one of the questions that, because the conversation to me should be powerful for people that are approaching it for the first time, but also people that are like, okay, well, I've done this, and what is it that I can get out of this? And I think what you touched on so beautifully there is some people have learned how to use this as a tool, as a way to navigate the inner landscape and psyche. And it becomes, because one of the things we joke that this conversation might become about is initiation. And we do not have periods in our lives, which we had for thousands of years, where at this age you become a man, and at this age you take this, and it's not just about being a man. And I think what's really inspiring is watching people in the community that actually use Vision Quest for an initiation, but it could be so personal. And I think maybe you can speak about this a bit, and that really ties around the fire ceremony inside the Vision Quest. But one person could be there because they've been afraid their whole life of spiders, and another person could be there because they've literally liberated themselves mentally and consciously from life itself. And there's all these different levels of initiation going on, which is self-chosen. And I think my last thought I wanted to add on to what you added, the thing that has always stunned me is that people that are so terrified and so uncomfortable when they approach it, is that nearly every time the medicine seems to treat them really, really gently the first time. I'm a bit baffled by that. I've never seen, it's a fascinating thing. But so I mean, we're talking about the role of initiation that it played in your life. And we're talking about what people essentially can do to use it as a mechanism in their lives. I think people do a lot of ceremonies in the beginning if they're trying to sort themselves out from an addiction, or maybe this is a new way of being. And then what you tend to see, those that develop very healthy relationships with it, it tends to become like a way of coming to check in with the self, just one of many, which I think is important for us to mention. It's just one of many mechanisms. What are your thoughts?
So you said a lot of things there. I want to speak to the one thing is this, it just hooked me a little bit, in the curiosity of why the people who sometimes come quite terrified about the experience and then tend to have a very gentle and very guided experience, And what came up for me in that conversation was and this is really about trusting the process, is that your inner being wants you to succeed. It wants you to succeed. Your inner being wants you to triumph over what it is that you came to triumph. And so it's not going to set you up for failure. It will only set you up to deal with the difficult thing when it feels that you are ready for it. And so when that challenge comes and you've got to face that difficult thing that you've been avoiding, that's the time when you are ready to do it. And to trust that now is the time. Okay, I'm ready. Let's roll up my sleeves and let's do it. And so this conversation we've been having about initiation, I think, has been a very important one, because we speak about medicine and we speak about the journeys that people have and the profound insights and realizations that they have about the universe, about their life, and seeing the bigger picture and the blind spots, and it's profound. It's life-changing stuff. But it's as an insight and as a clarity, it's nothing but an insight and a clarity. Initiation becomes the actual process by which that transformation or that shift that needs to happen is in some way embodied, whether it's symbolically embodied or whether it's actually embodied. So for some people, like their whole thing is they've got a shyness and they can't speak publicly or they can't sing publicly, and they'd rather die than that's like an absolute thing. The embodiment of the transformation of realizing that there's nothing to be scared of, and that that it's completely harmless, is the initiation of actually doing it, of doing that thing that you've never done before, and grabbing it, and then we've had that conversation about the hero's journey, about grappling your most difficult thing and then triumphing. And that's essentially what the process, I think, of initiation is, and why we've been speaking about it so strongly, is that in the process, in the ceremony work, we are facilitating people triumphing over those things that had disempowered them so many times before. We are creating that space where they get to face that difficult thing and then succeed. And if not succeed now, come back and do it again. But to know that the arena is designed for you to win, designed for you to get to that place, to triumph, and then to bring that embodiment into your life and do it differently in your life. And so ceremony for me is a place where this is the thing that's really taking me out. I come to ceremony, I get to transform it, triumph, have that initiation, bring it into my life, and then embody that in that transformation in my life from there onwards.
Yeah, and there is very much what I'm connecting to and listening to you, what you're sharing. There is sadly a very clear distinction between the person that gets these powerful messages through these spaces that all these beautiful facilitators create, whether it's a breathwork session, ayahuasca session, whether it's a singing session. I want to be clear, first of all, that to me, if that space is created in a certain way, that we commune with ourselves. But I think sadly, there is a very clear distinction, because I confess I have been one of those people that just keep getting the same message and refusing to make the transformation in my life. Between the person that comes and believes that all you need to do is have the vision or the realization in ayahuasca, for instance, and then it's done, and then feeling frustration after a year, because I even had someone say to me, like, I keep getting the same message type of thing. And I think what I like about what you're saying is the initiation is the part where, for instance, we always have a fire ceremony in the middle of the vision quest. And some people, as you know, don't do anything. And some people step forward and take a chance to make a life declaration, like a life-changing thing. We recently had Brother Kai, who mentioned to us that he threw his tobacco in there many years ago and never touched it again. I'm just using him because he's a facilitator and he wouldn't be worried about us sharing his process. But I think that's a really important thing, is and I think that's where, it's become quite a big word. We talk about integration, the circles we have afterwards, coaching. But I think it's become a really huge responsibility that is essentially the evolution of looking at ayahuasca work without the romanticism, that it requires your active engagement to take that message that you've been given, and sometimes you're not even clear exactly what it is. What do you think are the differences between, because there's no doubt some people completely transform, and yet some people just keep coming back, and there almost seems to be a frustration that they're not getting what they're looking for. Do you want to speak a bit on that? It's a very broad subject.
It is a broad subject. I really do think it's got a lot to do with the space, and every ceremony and the way space is held is very particular to the results that it produces. And where I've been in ceremonies where generally the whole ceremony is a lot of people speaking about love and peace and the one, you know, how wonderful life is in the universe and so on, versus those ceremonies I've been to where everyone is like talking about the real stuff, the vulnerable, gutsy stuff, owning their shit, you know, taking responsibility for how they've been and how like real shits they've been to the people that they in their lives and how they've treated their own bodies, and people who just get real and like recommit and go, this is what life is about. I think it's got a lot to do with the circle. It's got a lot to do with the way the ceremony is run and who's running it and the facilitation and how that facilitate. I mean, there's the difference between a facilitator who comes and like goes, I know everything because I'm the facilitator, you know, versus people who are really just taking on their life, because we look to those examples. And the examples of people in the group. And I think it's very much a chain reaction. When you see somebody transforming your life, you want to get in there as well. You know, you want to get in there. But if you see everybody's just kind of like sharing love and light and how beautiful everything is, then that's the space. And those tend to be the spaces where people are like, you know, I had this profound experience, but my life is still shit, or I'm still struggling with this relationship, and now I'm getting confused and frustrated because I'm actually passive aggressive, and you know, and I thought I was love and light, but in truth, you know, and then people really struggle because then there's inner conflict between who you are, and it's a huge difference when you can go, I'm actually dark and I am light, I'm all these things, and I can own it, and then I know what I'm working with because I'm not needing to deny anything. I think the moment we sitting in any space where we're denying any aspect of ourselves, because whatever we deny, we will start projecting onto other people because they're doing it, not me. In the meantime, we're the ones that really are creating it, and we're the ones that are doing it. And that's a tough process. It really, really is a tough process. And it requires you being in an environment where people are engaging that way and are being honest and saying, you know, this is what I'm grappling with, and this is what it looks like, and this is how I show up, and this is what my shadow looks like when it shows up, and this is what it looks like when I'm transforming it and I'm working at it. So I think it's got a lot to do with the space. I think it's got a lot to do with the facilitation. I think it's got a lot to do with the ethos of the work, you know. And then it shows. You'll see people are like, they, you know, are real and they're connected, or they're speaking about their ideas and the you know, their different philosophies or their different spiritual ideas. You know, spiritual ideology is spiritual ideology. It's, you know, it's a huge difference between being really transformed yourself.
Yeah, that's really powerful, because I mean, as we approach the hour now and we're moving to the last 15 minutes, one of the things I wanted to say to you was that I'd love to open this conversation and to come back perhaps in 6 or 8 weeks for a second interview once I've interviewed a whole lot of other people on this fun journey I'm on. But to have this conversation of essentially what a wake circle is, and a lot of people I think have misunderstood, but I think for me, and I would like you to, because I feel like you've just been speaking into it, for me it was this never-ending journey of building up more and more ideologies and philosophies, and to actually finally experience that what was required was to remove all those concepts from a space so that a person could only genuinely show up without being able to hide behind concepts and ideas. And it's such an incredible thing to experience, because the one thing that I think you put into such perfect verbiage was that when one person truly shows up, they're willing to be the fool, they're willing to show up as the jester, to go, okay, well, you guys have all got this figured out, but I'm suicidal, or I have. And then what happens in the room every time is this incredible transformation. And what's amazing is, and you and I have had this discussion for many years, if people started showing up authentically like that, and it didn't have to be dark, it could just be like, I'm a bit lonely. The second that someone dropped a concept or a philosophy into the wake circle, it would almost destabilize, and you could actually see people pulling back out of safety. And what happened, so for instance, you were sharing like a lot of vulnerable stuff with us tonight, And if I watched it as a facilitator, people lean forward and they're becoming more and more enrolled. And then there's this incredible need for us to meet with concepts or to answer that person and not just to allow them to be there in their authenticity. And someone will be like, yeah, but that's because you've got a 5-dimensional problem. And as soon as concepts slip into the space, it's almost like, for a lack of a better way of putting it, God leaves, and being playful. But it's almost like what we have been trying to work on for many years when it comes to Wake Circle is what it is that shows up when you create a vacuum, when you remove the concepts and the ideas and the egos, and you just all stare at each other as an embodiment of, call it, the same spirit, and you have a conversation without those things. And to me, you encapsulated that incredibly. Any thoughts on that?
I actually think you shared it incredibly well. Look, in a lot of our brainstorming, one of the things that came up, and it was a realization, I think quite a while back, where we were just realized that what's hugely in the space, what makes any space unsafe, that we always managing projections. We are always dealing with projections because we are always projecting. Right now, I'm projecting onto you. All your facial expressions, I'm projecting my world onto you. And so if you're not looking a certain way, it can spin me out, you know what I mean? And we're dealing with projections all the time. And so we've been speaking about, well, how do we create a space where we pull back our projections and we just deal with ourselves? Because the minute we do that, then our opinions, our judgments, our perceptions of how things should be and the value system, how it should be, what we find is that underneath there is a core instinctual value system that is just essential to human beings, that doesn't require language and doesn't require concepts, but it requires presence. And presence doesn't require language. It just requires you to be there with the person and to see them without a future or a past or an identity or a name. And the minute you can see people like that and just go, wow, there's this being, beautiful being, this energy that's in front of me, looking back at me. And when I'm looking at this energy is looking back at me, and suddenly we feel like we're looking at ourselves. We are one person. That's not an ideology, that's an experience. And so what we're doing is we withdraw all those things that would be projections into the space that have us feel like we need to dodge, because if somebody's projecting their advice onto me and going, yeah, you need to go look into your past lives because there's something there, that's why you are like you are. And then I've got to deal with, okay, my past lives because it's your perception, and do I agree and do I not agree? All that management system, because the minute you take something on and it becomes an agreement, you get locked into an agreement of going, oh yeah, I do have an issue with my past life. I do feel like I'm in the wrong body, and in a past life I was living, and it's all that kind of stuff. And then suddenly you're in this kind of contractual thing of trying to figure this world out. So if we can remove those things and just go, take away those contracts and just go, well, what are you left with what are you just left with when you are with yourself? Then you can start doing that work. And that for me is about creating that environment that is free of projection, free of all the stuff that has us feel like we've got to keep our guard up, we've got to keep our filters up so that we don't allow certain things in, because we've got to be careful about what we buy, what belief we take on, or and especially when we are in an emotionally vulnerable space, we are very susceptible to somebody coming on and going, you need to be careful about, and then you go, oh, I need to be careful. And then you take that on because this thing could latch on to me. There is nothing more dangerous than a disempowering idea that finds certainty within you. That's the most dangerous thing there is, a disempowering idea that acquires certainty in you. Because the minute it acquires certainty in you, then it becomes real in your physical experience, in your emotional experience. So How do we not have that happen? Well, just don't anything into anybody's space, hold the space. And then we come with this term that we go, well, what is holding space? Being present with a person and not sticking anything into their space, not your opinion, not your prophecy, not your whatever it is. Don't stick anything into the space, just hold space, facilitate their process and nothing else.
That is so powerful, man. Like obviously this conversation is never ending and we get slowly more distinct on it. But like, I have never experienced a single person that I've worked with, no matter what I was seeing. So even if there was an energy involved, or I have never met a single person that the moment they decide that the idea, they're not completely convinced of the idea anymore, that anything can stay with them. They have to be completely convinced. I mean, I've known a guy that had spent his whole life that was having this interaction with a belief system, and some people would call it an entity. Some people would tell you that hermetics tell us that they're both present. Doesn't matter. I have never, ever seen a person that if you can penetrate that idea to the point where they are no longer convinced of it, that they don't free themselves of that thing. And I believe that you call it story healing, right? But I have never, ever experienced, ever, that's how like important this is to me, an exception. And I think why that's so important is this led you and I on this conversation for many years. Then how do we make a place so safe that we allow others to just suspend our arrogance, even as facilitators, even as participants, and just, this is the way I would put it into a word. When I think about creating a wake circle, it is saying that this space is going to be conducive for you to hear yourself speak. And if anyone interrupts that process, they need to admit it might be arrogant. Example, me in the middle of your ceremony going up to you going, this is about your father, or anything like that. And that could be a breathwork process. And, you know, we help people move into altered states, and people are highly susceptible in those states. And I think, isn't that really the core of what we're talking about, is we are creating a space where we can hear our inner voice. And what you brought up very powerfully is that people show up in an incredible way if one person does. If the one person owns a little bit of something, everybody else seems to do it, you know? Yeah, it's an absolutely incredible subject. But I think we'll talk very much about, because that's Wake Circle, that's essentially where we're going in our work, you and I think we'll have a session where we talk about that. So where do you see yourself? I mean, this is a difficult question, and essentially I am going to do this to every person that I interview in the closing 10 minutes. First of all, there's two questions. The first one is, anything you want to say about these times that we find ourselves in right now, whether you want to be specific about anything, or 2021, we're in a very strange time. You don't have to speak to any specific subject. And then the closing part of the question would be where you see yourself in the next 5 or 10 years, or where you're hoping your work goes, or what your passion is burning towards.
So yeah, just speaking to the times we're in, it's been such an interesting, I mean, I've been so tempted to jump into the cross section of firing that's, and then I just pulled back and pulled back and pulled back and pulled back. And then whenever I felt triggered by something, because sometimes I'd be triggered by one side, then I'd be triggered by the other side. And I was like, I don't even know, you know, it's such contradiction going on that you just got to go. I start seeing that contradiction within myself. I start seeing how that polarity actually is within myself as well, these different parts playing out. But it's as if that separation or that contrast has been so accentuated that it just seems so confusing that it almost doesn't make sense anymore. That polarity just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to be on one side of anything anymore. And I think that it becomes a very powerful spiritual practice to just start seeing that, this is not an us or them thing. It's almost like spirit and the universe has just gone, we're going to take your entire version of what us and them is, and we're going to shake it up, and suddenly you're just going to not know which side you're on. It's kind of like, we had this idea of like, you're either for us or you're against us. That was kind of the maxim of communism, of so many different things. It's like, you're either for us or you're against us. Which side are you on? And then they took that box and shook it so hard that you just was like people who were on one side are now looking at people that like, but we were on the same side once, and like, no, we're not on the other side. Just a week ago. Yes, we were on the same. We were on the left side and you on the right, and now, and it's just it's shaken it up and just thrown that out, because any paradigm of going it's us or them, it's that's not the two. There is us, and there's us or them, and then there's us and us. And the minute we start going, okay, well, that's probably the new world order, is the world of us and the world of us and them. That's where we're going now, is to realize that there is just us and us. It really is just us and us in this pot trying to work it out. And there's a whole lot of game players kind of trying to reel in their fish, and everything is sent for a loop. So what a beautiful opportunity to just reassess all of that and just go, well, not playing the games anymore. And these stories, all of the stories need to fall. Like literally, stories need to fall. They just all need to fall. All the stories that have conditioned our path lines and everything, they don't hold relevance anymore. We've got to look at the situation of where we are as we are without the historical context and start dealing with what's present and what's now. So I think it's a beautiful time.
I like the idea of a story falling, because I've become so confused about what left and right is, up and down, and you've described it beautifully, that eventually I realized that behind all these stories is such a presence of peace, and chaos is always encapsulated by order, and then chaos, and then order. And all I mean is I felt like all that's been required from me is to remove my energy from the story and to just watch the stories outplay, So I love that. I think it's really powerful, because we've watched families being ripped apart just about a piece of cloth. We're watching entire communities, spiritual communities, snap down the middle, and they're still fighting. And it's as though, to me, they're not getting the joke. I love the way you explained it. It's almost like spirit's gone, now you're on the left, now you're on the right, now you're pro, now you're a spiritual, now you're a conspiracy guy. And then it's this, and then eventually you're like, am I a conspiracy guy? Then you're like, you know what, I'm actually a shadow guy, I'm not all about the light. And eventually you just cannot stick to one of these labels. You're just like, okay, I get the joke. It's back to the whole Zen thing. I'm none of these things. I can engage with any of these stories, and just step back, and then you're back at peace again. It's hysterical. And your passions for, where do you think you're going to be putting your energy into the next few years?
So the two things that has really emerged for me is family and community. Just building family and community, and we've over the years through Mad Hatter, and then developing into Wake, it's been this path of developing a community, a tribe. I mean, we use these terms loosely, but we're trying to describe something where we're connected very, very deeply as a community, but it's not kind of a doctrinal thing. It really is a humanity thing. It is a thing about seeing the humanity in each other and being willing to build a whole life around it. So that for me is that is the path, and part of what holds it together for me is music, is song and dance. It's been an incredible journey of connecting with people who love to dance and love to sing as a spiritual act, as a connective act, as a community act, and not just as a entertainment thing. So live music has become an incredible part of my journey, and music of devotion, not just devotion to some, you know, higher consciousness, but devotion to the higher consciousness within each of us, and to the journey of transformation, celebrating that journey of transformation. So building family, connecting community, building tribe, these are the things. And I don't know what it looks like, because we're living in such chaotic times. I don't know if it would look like a whole community living together, or if it would look like different communities all over the world, or it would look like a community of facilitators, you know. But there's definitely a sense of a lineage that is emerging, and that we're creating it literally from scratch. I think the term a contemporary shamanism is speaking to something that's not pretending to be connected to tribal bloodlines, like we can only be connecting in altered states if we are connected to, you know, we've got to find our own roots. We can't just depend on the you know, we've got to literally stand on the ground and start growing our own roots in whatever way we can, and not wait for permission to do it. And I think that's the beauty of what contemporary shamanism is about. In its when I say it's in its authentic state, I mean, there's a lot of it that is about pretense and about wanting to look a certain way. But if you get down to it, I think there's a huge community of what I would call contemporary shamanism, of people really finding their own deeper connection and being in a community of like-minded people and being able to build on it. Obviously using contemporary insights and clarities that we've had incredible gurus and teachers who have influenced our lives, from Eckhart Tolle to Ramdas to, you know, we are integrating all of these masters into our lifestyle. And I think that's what's emerging. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's a unique thing, and it's a new thing. And we are literally creating a new lineage of how to be together, that is not about separation and division and about yours and mine, but about learning, well, how can we really be on this earth together and be gentle on the earth as well? So for me, what I see in the next 5 years or 10 years is a lot of singing with a lot of people, a lot of initiations of transformation, I see myself seeing a lot of people transform their lives and build and create something new, and then take on a new transformation, and that there's a very deep celebration of that. I would like to be part of that kind of tradition where 10 years down the line, there is just a whole mass of people who are just incredibly connected, building incredible things, doing incredible things out in the world. There are already so many people in our community who are just doing such magnificent stuff. And I'm sure you'll interview some of them, just in terms of like, what are they doing with their transformation? They've had so many profound journeys, and then they said, okay, well, this is what I'm taking on. I'm taking on permaculture, and I'm going to go and take on this project out there. And it's where it translates out into the world, where people are doing incredible work. I want a community of people like that. I want to be part of a community of people like that, doing such incredible work and connecting together, and just creating stronger and stronger ethos of togetherness. And then singing, lots of singing.
I like that. Yeah, it's an incredible thing, because I mean, like you said, you know, if you look at Wake Circle, what we're busy trying to slowly create and birth, a distinction that just came out in what you explained is essentially, if we arrive at that table filled with our ideas and our concepts and our beliefs, that table is unsafe. What we need in the world right now is a table where tribes of all beliefs can sit down at the same table and be so excited that the person on their left perceives God differently to they do, and that the person on the right dresses differently to they do, and excited that the other person at the shamanic table goes into trance differently, and they use medicine, and I think that's what people are kind of missing here. I think in community, and it excites me, is if you remove the stuff from those circles that make them unsafe, that they all come together, and then it's like we can all Because what you're describing is to me, it feels like reveling, it feels like celebration, singing, and the only thing that can stop us from singing together and dancing together, celebrating other medicine men and communities, and is really just is ideas and doctrines of the mind, you know. And I think that's beautiful. And I look forward to pulling you back into conversation, because you and I, God, I mean, I think if anything, we were being quite polite on subjects. I think that we might be challenged next time, because everyone could sense that we were just tittering around a little bit, playing it a bit safe, I think. But I really enjoyed the conversation, and I really look forward to seeing where things do go. And I think what a nice way for us to seal off, I'm going to ask if you feel up to it, to close us out with music. But you know, even this little community, which is just this Facebook group that we're broadcasting in right now, it's an example, I think, of how things should be done, because there are many medicine people in this community that helped create this little Facebook group, and we are all very supportive of them. And this idea that of us versus them, it's something that really needs to end, you know. And yeah, I think it's just really inspiring. And I think that all that, to me, this whole thing is about is creating a safe table where all these ideas and lineages can sit down and sing and dance together when it's need be, you know. So thank you for a very powerful conversation and for some very interesting distinctions. If there's anything that you want to add, please do. And then I'm pretty much done from my side, guys. I will announce to you in the next 2 days who the next interview is going to be. It will be on a Monday night every 2 weeks. I will also have recorded this, and we will put out a version of this later on. But for now, it's only going to be available in the Mad Hatters. And yeah, Heinrich, just to add any closing thoughts for us, and then I think play us out, and then end the broadcast when you want to. So if you feel the need after 30 seconds of singing, because it can't be easy to just suddenly jump into a song, or if you feel the need to play 1 or 2 songs, people are quite mature enough to be able to sign off when they're ready. And from my side, I want to thank you for your evening, and I really enjoyed chatting to you.
Oh, thanks, my brother. It was good chatting to you too. Cool. Yeah, I think I just actually want to echo something that you shared at the end, because we are talking about getting out of this idea of the us and them and the needing to protect, and just go, at what point do we start having a conversation where we drop the preciousness, and just recognize that we all deal with ego. I deal with ego all the time. Sometimes I feel threatened. Sometimes I feel protective and defensive. We all have the same mechanics of that one aspect of us that is all embracing and being able to see, and that aspect of us that is mistrustful, doubtful, revengeful, resentful, wary, and then got to create people who we've got to be wary of, and so on. And we all have that. I have that. And it's something that I've got to sit and grapple with for myself, because it's not easy for me. It's easy for me to love certain people who are agreeable to me. And it's hard for me to love people who are not agreeable to me and who are not aligned with my values and my way of seeing things. And it's hard work. It's hard work to just go, can I drop this thing that I have about you and start seeing you as another human being, as another presence, as another aspect of what I am, of God, of spirit, of the the one same energy, and that requires something. It requires something, especially if I feel challenged by you. But that's the practice, and it's important that I in myself practice not getting triggered by or hooked in by certain things, and always be willing to look and go, well, what's there for me about that, So I just think that that's an important ethos that we're going to keep talking about, is just, we've got to let go of the stuff that separates us. Because otherwise, I mean, I was watching, the series Vikings, and like they keep changing sides, but they're killing each other. But it's all the same thing. They're just kind of constantly at war, and like then it's revenge, and it's just, we're no different. We're just not as violent as that, but we're the same. And at some point, we just got to go, actually, we're all the same. We really just are all the same, and we need to start seeing that if we are to really bring forth a new paradigm. And that's what we want to do. We want to bring forth a new paradigm. Well, what does that new paradigm look like? And that's what we got to start getting interested in. What does that new paradigm look like? What's it going to take to create it? So that's my closing thought on the matter. So that first song that I sang was that mantra that I spoke about, the first mantra that I ever heard. I think mantras are just an incredibly powerful thing. This is also a new song. I don't know if the sound is good, but anyway. Om Asatuma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Om Asatuma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya. From the maze of my mind, help me break free to the open spaces of my heart. I've been lost in 1,000 stories and they've been tearing me apart. And all the lies I've been told, chasing fool's gold, the need to please, combat the enemies while I'm on my knees praying, won't you set my spirit free? Om Asatuma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Om Asatuma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Gamaye Gamayo Gamaya Gaye Gaye Gayam Hey Ya You Gamaye Gamayo Gamaya Gaye 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 Gayam Hey Ya You Great God, I call on you, please open up my eyes. Lead me through confusion, help me see through the disguises of my mind. Help me perceive from unreal to real. Hey, you are. Om Masatuma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Om Asatuma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya. From the east to the west, where I walk, it's my quest to awaken hearts and minds, to release misunderstandings about the universe and God. And one day when I die, there'll be no cause to cry. I'll be way up there where the eagles fly. I'll be singing my song through the sacred fires, and all will come to peace. Om Asatuma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Om Asatuma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Gamaye Gamayo Gamaya Gaye Gaye Gayam Hey You Gamaye Gamayo Gamaya Gaye 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 Gayam Hey You set my spirit free, set my spirit free, set my spirit free. Won't you set my spirit free? set my spirit free? Won't you set my spirit free? Set my spirit free. Won't you set my spirit free? And with that, I will close.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you for your time. House.
House. Thank you, my brother. Yeah.